B2B companies have spent the past 20 years measuring, I say, the wrong numbers. And most firms measure the activity inside the pipeline. And they track cold calls and leads and open emails, CRM stages, yeah? But very few organisations measure the most important number of all, which is how much of their total addressable market can actually see them. So in other words, we obsess over like internal activity while ignoring this external stuff that's going on, which is visibility. There's nothing, but there's nothing new, nothing special. Sales has always been a numbers game, but broadcasting has always been a numbers game. Advertising has always been a numbers game. The difference is that B2Bs have never joined those numbers together. If you're aware of broadcasters, they solved the problem decades ago. So they kind of asked these straightforward questions like, how many people saw the programme? How often did they see? Which slot performed best? Which creative asset held their attention? And what response did it produce? And while they were measuring audience size and frequency and performance, B2Bs were just counting cold calls in pipeline stages. So what we're doing now is we're just simply applying that same audience logic to new business development and tracking it. Yeah, from the first exposure that we achieve, that they get, to that commercial outcome. So once you start looking at the numbers this way, something kind of very obvious begins to appear. So instead of measuring activity inside a small pipeline, you begin measuring activity, or start measuring visibility across your entire total addressable market. And of course, you're creating this kind of continuous exposure to your total addressable market. Then you're monitoring the kind of the behavioural signals that follow that. So there's nothing clever, futuristic, or anything like that about this approach. It's just the same discipline that broadcasters and advertisers have used for decades. But just apply it to business revenue, business gen. So when you start measuring the market, you're able to visualize your position through very different lenses. So what we want to do is, just recap for a minute. So first you create this educational content and assets, and you teach, you don't sell, you teach your solutions, and you explain why prospects should buy from you. I mean, it's simple, right? I mean, we've been doing it for years. Next, you produce and distribute your social posts at scale. That whole kind of 600 posts per profile. And then all this outbound posting and content drives all this traffic. So all your posts, all your exposure drives traffic, not only to your call to action download, but to your weekly live shows. So the whole point is you want your total addressable market to get to know, like, and trust you again at scale. That's all you want. You don't want anything else. And you're probably going, okay, I see what you're saying. But if we're doing all this stuff at scale, how on earth would you get to manage it? How can you do this? We're talking thousands, tens of thousands of things that are being sent out and managed. And of course, that brings us to the salesXchange operating system. So the first thing to say is that it's not SaaS. It's local web and a telemetry server on premise and partly in the cloud, but it's web servers. It's not marketing automation, SEO, social media, or content marketing or anything like that. It's the entire B2B workflow every one of us has always known, inside out. But it's designed into a centralized, consolidated operating system that enables and orchestrates everything we as B2Bs have always needed. But I would say we have been too blinkered up to now by big tech, MarTech, and their advocates to realise what was actually being, it's a bit harsh, but what's actually being done to us and our businesses. And I mean that, done to us. So if you look at this, a bit difficult for those who are listening on podcast, because that, and even for you might need to put this onto a larger screen if you're looking at this, but I'll read through it. Okay, I'll read through it. We have 4 main engines and 2 specific layers, and I'll go through them. First of all, we start at SX Reach, and that's a market and visibility engine. Okay, and we talked about that with social and email and banners. Next is Live, is a broadcast authority engine. So as a result of your efforts communicating outbound, where do they go? Anonymously? Currently nowhere, but with this, anybody can look and watch and get to know, like and trust you in their time and in catch up, but they can see you live. That's why I do this live. This is properly live. Yeah, it's be very easy to. I mentioned this kind of a few times. It's very easy to say, do you know what? Let's just do a video, because if it goes pear shaped, we can sort it out in editing before we actually push it out to the customers or to the big wide world, the thousands of people that watch it. What's the point in that? Anybody can knock out of it. I say anybody. Video's a video. Live is authentic. You know, you wouldn't spill your drink. You'd edit that out. So we've got this live. You've got you know me by now. I do go off at a bit of a tangent. So we've got this broadcast authority engine, and so that's your live shows. But we set up live shows, the live show studio in your office. So if you've got space, because you've got people working from home, if you've got space, would you take one of the offices, convert it into a studio, and then you can reach your hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of your total addressable market every week. Happy days. Okay. But we also, and I'll come on to that, that we set up the remote studios for your salespeople, and that relates specifically to SX Connect.